Welcome to I'm Dying Over Here, the podcast that gets real about life, death, and everything in between. I'm your host, Ashton.
And I'm your co-host, Denise.
And together, we're bringing humor, heart, and honesty to the hospice conversation. Because when you work in the end of life care, you realize it's not just about dying, it's about truly living.
Proudly sponsored by Abundant Hospice.
Welcome to I'm Dying Over Here, where hospice nurses and staff talk about the truths, the chaos, and even find the laughter in life's final chapter. Real stories, real conversations, real humanity. I'm your host, Ashton Balliet with Abundant Hospice, and with me I have Miss Cynthia Cantu.
Hello there.
Hey, Cindy. How are you doing today?
I'm doing wonderful. How are you today, Ashton?
I'm doing good. So we're on this new adventure, okay, with this podcast. I'm Dying Over Here. It's a good play on words. We're going to come in this with boldness, courage. You know, we need to really talk to the community. We need to cut the taboo about hospice, right, in the community.
Exactly.
There's a big stigma around it. There's misconceptions. There's misinformation. There's a lot of just false information out there about hospice, right? So, you know, we're going to talk about the elephant in the room, being hospice, right? You know, tell me a little bit about your nursing experience, hospice experience. So tell me about yourself, Cindy.
I've been in the medical field since 1992. Did a lot of different things from medical assistant to lab work and nursing since 2012. I've done chemotherapy. I've done oncology nursing, mother-baby nursing, dialysis nursing, and then COVID tossed me into hospice.
Okay, so that's how you got into hospice, was
Correct.
During the COVID time. Okay.
Right.
Wow. So you have a lot of good nursing experience.
Right.
Was there anything in particular during COVID that put you into hospice?
Basically, it was just, even though I was a dialysis nurse, it was hard to have work because only the ones that were COVID ICU nurses were having work. So I had to find a different avenue of work,
Gotcha.
even in the nursing field.
Gotcha. So it kind of just fell into your lap. Like you were just looking around and you needed to figure out where you could be working, basically, right?
Correct.
Okay. Did you know anything about hospice before?
I did not. Honestly, when I started nursing, my nursing career, I said I'd end in hospice because I thought it's a more relaxed, mellow.
Mm-hmm.
You think of end of life like you put it in the back burner and you don't want to think about it. And that's how the world sees it. Even in nursing, I didn't want to see it.
Mm-hmm.
I just thought I'm going to end my career there because it's a chill area, but it really isn't. It needs a lot of education, a lot of taboos, a lot of misconceptions. And so I'm glad we're doing this.
What do you think is probably the biggest taboo or misconception about hospice?
I think that the biggest misconception about hospice is that people are afraid to say it. Let's just get it out there. The elephant in the room is death. Let's just say it, right?
Exactly.
Death.
No, I like that you said that.
Afraid to say that.
Is death. I think, we focus on so much, right, of living, right? And I think it's just the truth is eventually one day we're all going to die. We're all going to pass away, right? And so I think that people not wanting to talk about it is actually sweeping it under the rug, but the dirt's still there.
Away.
They think it's going to go away, but it's still going to happen regardless. Right. And so, having the information of what hospice really is and how great it is, right, at the end of life is paramount for families. It's it's needed, and just end of life in general, right? Talking about death. That's definitely something most people shy away from, right? Especially with their mom or their dad. I think about my mom and dad, and they're definitely getting up in age, and it's one of those things that now that I'm in the hospice field, there's things that I'm thinking about. When it comes to like advanced directives or the care at end of life, what that looks like, caregivers, or even, nursing homes, or, all of that stuff that comes with the end of life.
Things that we didn't think about before COVID. You know, COVID brought a different perspective, and anybody can die at any moment. You know, like it was always put in the back burner. Nobody really has insurance to bury a loved one when you're young, you know, because COVID brought all of that to the forefront. But, you know, the misconception is that if we don't talk about it, it's going to go away. Or if I don't say hospice, it won't happen to me. Or if I say hospice, my family member's going to think that I'm giving up on them. It's to them, they think I'm giving up.
Right. No, exactly. I mean, they pushing the hospice away is
Doesn't make it
it
go
doesn't
away.
make it go away. Exactly. You know, and I think one of the key points too is, you know, the silence that comes with it, right? Like we talked about, you know, not saying the word implies that it's going to not be there. But just because we don't
Like it
talk
won't
about
happen.
it, right?
If I don't
like,
say the word, it
right?
won't
If I don't,
happen.
yeah, if I don't say it, it's not going to happen. It's not going to come to me. It's not going to come to my mom, my dad, you know, grandma, grandpa, whoever it may be. You know, but I think that's where, you know, what we have to overcome. And that's why we're here. That's why we're doing this, you know, is to just, like I said, to chop through that taboo.
The truth is that no matter what culture you're in, death is something we all have in common.
Right. Exactly. Right. Yeah. Being born, taxes, and death. That's all. That's
Why
what,
is it so easy to talk about taxes or, you know, the tabloids or what an actor did, but we can't really talk about death?
right. Talk about the truth
This is the
end of
truth.
life.
This is what
Yeah.
needs to be discussed.
Exactly. And a lot of times families will avoid it until the very end, right? Until their loved one is at death's door,
And
right?
then they don't have all the information. Like, why don't we discuss with our mother, father, sister, brother, what do you want done at end of life? Like, if something
Exactly.
happens to you, what do you want me to do?
Exactly.
'Cause-
That's a big thing is knowing what their wishes are. And a lot of times, you know, and I mean, we've seen it in our field where,
Yep.
the children, they don't know what their mom and dad wanted.
And we end up being the referee
The referee,
without a whistle. You know,
right.
it's like,
Exactly.
trying to stop,
Yeah.
the arguments, and because everybody wants to call the shots, but not everybody wants to partake in the care.
Exactly. And and when a lot of times what happens is, there are times where it's almost too late, right? And there's, we're playing referee, or anyone on the team is playing referee.
Yep.
And you've got the son wanting this, the daughter wanting that, and no one's on the same page. And so I think the community having the information,
Right.
San Antonio and greater, having the information of what hospice really is for everyone. It is the elephant in the room, but it's something that needs to be discussed. It's something that needs to be tackled and handled. And, and I think speaks volumes where it's good that we come in that place, because we can educate them, right? We can, provide them information and, any of the false information that's out there, because there's a lot of stigmas out there around hospice.
Especially cultural.
Especially cultural.
You
And
come
talk
from
about that.
Texas. You come from Texas, or you come from a Hispanic community. We take care of our own.
Yeah.
We don't throw our family away in a nursing home. You have a lot of misconceptions. My grandmother used to say, "We get old and we die." But now we look at our grandparents like we can't let them die. We got to do everything. We're in a community where we've taught everyone to advocate. Everybody's looking at getting healed and getting better, but we're not looking at death is inevitable.
Right.
We're all
right,
being born and we're going to die.
right.
But what is the big thing that we're all doing now? We're Googling how to live forever.
Right. And I think that's a big thing too, is, there's, everyone can be Dr. Google now. But, to the point you were saying about the cultural, kind of tell me, help me understand as well, because San Antonio is definitely a huge population of Hispanic culture, right?
It is. And
So
it's a culture of its own, Texas. Texas is a culture of its own,
True. So what are some of the things that you've encountered, as far as like the cultural aspect of hospice out in the community? What's everyone's conception about, thought about what hospice is?
Basically, what I've learned is that when hospice is brought up, basically you're asking them to give up. And that's not the case. You know, hospice is about bringing comfort, your dignity being honored, to provide peace of mind for the family, teaching them along the way, helping them with the social worker and the chaplain, helping you get all your affairs in order. But it doesn't mean that you're going to pass away today.
Right, exactly. And that is one of the biggest stigmas that we come across is, what I tell families, right, or what you should tell families is years ago, hospice had the stigma of, okay, my loved one is going to die tomorrow.
Right. They think we're going to euthanize their
Right.
family members.
That's also another misconception too, where they think, oh, they're on hospice, then we're not going to do anything, right? We're just going to let them pass, let them die. And that's not the case at all, and I think reversing that stigma, reversing that mindset that the community has, especially in this community, right? In San Antonio is, like you said, the Hispanic culture is, we take care of our own. They pass away in our home with no help.
And then, but they're complaining the whole time, like, I'm tired. Who's going to help me? Who's going to,
Right, exactly.
We're exhausted and we don't want to accept respite. It's such a beautiful thing. When my mother, she passed away in 2003, I had my mom on hospice, but I never even was introduced to respite. There was no sending my mother anywhere for 5 nights. I would cry. I just need a weekend. I just need a weekend. You love your family member. You love them. But even to think that we're going to have to pay for something extra, and a lot of people don't realize respite is free. It's part of
the package.
It's part of the package. It's part of your rights. It's part of what you're receiving with hospice.
Yeah. And that goes into also where, families feel like I can't send my loved one somewhere during hospice services.
They feel guilty.
They feel guilty. There's, a shame and definitely a lot of guilt because they feel like like you said, I should be the one taking care of my loved one,
And we learned we can't, right?
Right. And
you can't care for yourself. If you're falling apart, you can't care for the person that's
exactly right. Yeah. You have to be able to know your limits, know your boundaries so you can care for, your loved one. And I definitely out in the field, I tell families all the time that it's more important that you acknowledge that you can't take care of your loved one in a certain aspect, then burn yourself out. And then not only do you suffer, but your loved one suffers, right? Because you're not acknowledging that, hey, I can't do this on my own. There's a lot of pride there, especially in this community, there's a lot of pride.
And I had to always invite people I invite you to allow yourself to be forgiven in your own self. Forgive yourself, in other words, forgive yourself. Because the regret that we hold is not appropriate. It's not real. It's our own self-guilt. It's our own self-persecution.
That's right. I like how you said that it's not real.
It's not real.
The regret is not real. I think there's a lot to say when you can change the mindset and the mentality of, I'm the only one that can take care of my loved one, to the mentality of there's a village behind me,
yes,
right, to take care of my loved one.
Absolutely.
Because it's the same thing when someone's born. You have family members that gather. You have aunts and uncles and cousins and everyone that wants to be around the baby.
I always say that.
So it should not be any different than when someone passes, when someone dies.
You go in labor in the beginning and you're in labor at the end. So the same hands that caught you, there's going to be another village of hands to help you.
Exactly, another village of hands. So I like that. But yeah, I think the biggest thing is a long time ago, hospice was my loved one's dying now. And then, that stigma is carried on through generations,
yes,
and through cultures. And,
it becomes a horror story.
It becomes a horror story, right? And, that's the biggest reason why we're doing this. And, there are other avenues of teaching is, hospice is not about that. Hospice is about providing that comfort during that journey, because like we said, it's inevitable. We're all going to die.
Right.
Right. And so if you have a village behind you to help you through that journey and that walk, then, that's what hospice is about.
Exactly. I can't tell you how many times people tell me, I wish I would have known that. Or I wish I would have heard it. Nobody ever told me. A lot of times we come into hospice with a closed mindset.
Yes.
Like, I don't want to discuss it because I don't want to face the emotional trauma. They don't want to look at what it's going to happen.
Right.
You know, a lot of times people think that don't say it in front of my loved one. Don't tell them they're dying.
Right.
The family member knows they're dying. They
Yes.
know more than we do.
Right. And that's another thing too is, you know, the mom or dad, right? They know that they're dying. But the children are wanting to, like you said, like
Not talk about it.
don't say the word hospice. Don't
Don't say death.
Don't
Don't
say
tell them
death.
they're dying.
Don't tell them they're dying. You know, use another frame of language to let them know they're getting extra care or home care or whatever it may be. But 99% of the time, that person, they know that they are dying. They know they have cancer. They know they have heart failure, or, you know, people, you know, sometimes in the earlier stages of like Alzheimer's and dementia, right? They know that it's going on. Now, whether they're lucid enough, you know, at times to know is hard to say, right? Obviously.
Right.
But in the earlier stages, they know that their mind is going. They, you know, and it can be frustrating, it can be very sad. And, you know, but the loved ones, they know that they're dying.
And a lot of times a family member doesn't want to tell their loved one they're dying or acknowledge it. It's because they don't want to face it.
Right.
They're still waiting on a miracle. They're
Yeah.
still hanging on what the doctor said. The doctor said, we're going to take this pill for this long, and then we're going to do this, and when are we going to do the next test?
Right.
You know, they're still hanging on the hope, and you don't have to lose hope. You know, God, if he still wants to come in and heal, he
Right.
will. We can't stop that. You know, we're here just to be the hands and feet of God, provide comfort through the journey, help them ease the discomfort, help them ease them, you know, the care totality during the journey with a nurse aide, helping you bathe your loved one, bringing the medications to the door. When your loved one is sick, bringing the nurse just to call the doctor for you and do that. You know, sometimes you got to take your loved one to the hospital. You don't have to do all of that, carry a patient who is now bedbound to the
Right.
hospital and try to figure out how you're going to get them there.
All these aggressive measures,
Yes.
all these, you know, extensive things where, you know, the loved one, the mom or dad, they're not wanting that. They want to be home. They want to be, you know, in a place that's safe. Being in a hospital is not a safe space
It's like
for them.
cold
Right?
and
Yeah, exactly.
detached.
Detached is very detached. And, you know, unfortunately, you know, the son, the daughter, whoever it may be, daughter-in-law, they just want to continue to almost like grasp onto more hope,
right.
right? Like if I do this for my mom, then that gives more hope that things will be reversed, things will get better. And like you said, I mean, there's nothing, you know, nothing short of a miracle. You know, on top of that, though, there's reality, right? I mean, there's just reality, and there's, you know, a bunch of things that are inevitable, and that's why hospice is so important. Is because that's why we're here. We're that village. We're those hands to help that journey.
And not just like when you're at a doctor's office. So it's not introduced appropriately. It's not introduced with a compassionate side.
Right.
You know, you have a doctor putting you on hospice, right? Say you have a kidney issue, but you have a cardiac issue too. And you go to the heart doctor, and the heart doctor's like, get off hospice. You don't belong on hospice. You're my patient. I'm not done with you. Well, you have two doctors confusing the patient.
Right. The
You
two
know,
conflicting ideas. And
yes. And then you're like, the doctor said that that I'm fine. I shouldn't be on hospice. You know, when you have a life-limiting illness that doesn't respond to treatment and you're hospice appropriate and you meet the guidelines, you should be home trying to recover. It doesn't mean you're going to stay on hospice. If you recover and you're able to, you know, continue with life, we will discharge you. We'll give you a little graduation
Yeah.
party.
I like how you talked about that too, because that is true, is that, well, for one, you have, you know, conflicting ideas. And, you know, a big part of this community and most communities, especially the elderly geriatric population, their mentality is, you know, my doctor knows it all, right?
Yeah.
So whatever my doctor says, that's what I'm going to listen to.
Yep.
And if you have two doctors that have conflicting ideas, more than likely they're going to listen to the doctor that says, well, you don't need to be on hospice,
Yeah.
right? Because we're
That's
talking about
hope.
death. Exactly. That's hope. I'm not dying.
Yeah.
You know, that's one of the biggest things is families coming in contact with that.
That just happened to me recently, you know. I used to have a family. Now, we don't talk about names or anything like that. We respect boundaries. But we treated an admission patient. got her breathing great. She's functioning, able to walk. Suddenly she's doing all these beautiful things. We're looking at quality, not quantity, right?
Right. Yep.
We're wanting you to make meaningful memories with your family. If you're able to heal and overcome, that's great, but, when she, because on hospice, people have the understanding that once you're on hospice, you can't see any other doctors. We treat one diagnosis, just one.
Right.
So even other doctors don't know that they can continue to see their other doctors for other diagnoses. So what happened is this lady had her appointment with the cardiologist, and the cardiologist saying, "Why are you on hospital? Look at you, you're walking." But he didn't recognize that this lady was just vented, and she is now walking and breathing better because she is on a breathing treatment.
Right,
And
right.
she was able to, overcome some of that. And it's not that it was the one-off fix-all, but he was just seeing
He was
the
only seeing the positive, yeah,
right, and
seeing the
confused her
improvement.
so bad. And it really, but what did come out of that conversation was, did you discuss with your parents? Because she said, I've been through this 3 times, intubated and vented and brought back. And I said, have you told your parents that what you want done? She says, because every time I come back, I don't have all my senses. It's not the same. And those are the harsh conversations we need to be having. That's the elephant in the room. We don't want to talk about death, but the repercussions of everything that happens when you get resuscitated and the things that, happen long term,
Yeah, for sure. I mean,
after
there's
resuscitation is real. Like this woman,
Yeah.
she turned around and her mom walked in the door and she says, "What are you doing here?" Because she had slammed the door in my face one day. And I said, well, I just came to see like what's happening. I want to just make sure I had a clear picture because there was no complaints or anything. And that's what happened was the 2 doctors,
right.
And the mom, after we discussed everything, they were just crying because the daughter was telling her, I don't want to be resuscitated. I don't want to be vegetative. I don't want you to have to take care of me when I'm going to be a vegetable on the couch and the next time's going to be worse. I don't want all of those things done to me.
Right.
And that just it brought such a weight off the mom's face. It really enlightened, that's how we can compassionately bring about advance directives
Right.
to the families.
Right. Well, another thing too is if they had talked about that before, right? And that's the elephant, right?
That's why
talking
we're the
about-
mediators. Yeah.
Exactly. So if they had talked about that, had conversations, had those hard conversations before, then, all of that probably could have been avoided.
Yeah.
Because one of the things, like you're right, is one of the things hospice is about is quality of life.
Right.
Right. We got to look at quality because number one, we're all going to die one day.
Right.
That's guaranteed. And number two, something, it's going to be from something, cancer, heart disease, whatever it may be, right? Because there's no cure for these types of illnesses, right? Because it's just part of life.
All right.
That's where hospice comes in. That's where those conversations should be had with family beforehand because I guarantee you, if they had conversations before being intubated and vented and all those other things, then there's a possibility of a better quality of life.
People have a lot of misconceptions about what a DNR is. They want to be resuscitated. They want you to do everything because they think if I sign a DNR, that means they're going to let me die, or I'm going to die in
Right.
pain, or I'm going to be euthanized.
Right.
DNR means you're just not going to have chest compressions.
Right.
You're
Yeah,
just-
DNR means, and that
If
is
you
another
have
another misconception of hospice, right? Is
cardiac
that
arrest,
we're not going to do anything, but that's totally false. You get an infection, you have a urine infection, lung infection, we're going to treat those. Those are part of comfort.
Right.
A DNR is simply stating that no one's going to do CPR on you.
Right.
Like we're going to make sure you're comfortable as your body, as your soul, as your mind, everything passes. And that's what a DNR really
Right.
is,
Because your heart has to stop so that you have no heartbeat,
Right.
and so that just means you're not going to do chest compressions, but everything else to do comfort can still be done.
Right, exactly. Everything else, I think that's one of the hardest conversations I come across out in the field is do not resuscitate forms, DNR, being undecided or no, I want this, I want this, I want this. And I mean, that's fine. All right. We respect patients' wishes. but at some point in time, that conversation does need to come up again.
Yes.
Because, like I said, that disease process, the way it goes is it has a natural trajectory of how it's going to look.
Right.
And, we want to make sure that the patient is, like you said, not going to be resuscitated and come back with less, sensory faculties, right? Like
Right.
you're going to, because that's the biggest thing is,
I always tell everybody, if I'm going to come back and my life is going to be a weight on you, or I'm going to be in bed bound, having to be changed, nobody, the last thing you lose is like your dignity, right? You don't want anybody to see you in a different light. Now, if your parent never told you like what their quality of life they want to experience versus quantity, yes, people can keep you alive. Yes, they can do all these things for you, but what is quality? Having a cup of coffee, getting up, sitting in the couch with your spouse or your children, having a meaningful conversation, or in a bed. When we talk about our culture, we speak to Hispanically in my culture. We say, I love you, like through food, through family gatherings. We get to a point where we don't understand why we're not going to feed a person when they're dying. Like, that's just saying, I'm going to let them starve. Those are the different misconceptions. And I'm glad we're doing this podcast because there's so many avenues that we have to touch that are really not.
Yeah, we're
addressed.
definitely gonna get into it the next several weeks with different episodes and different series, and we're gonna tackle a lot of different types of conversation, a lot of different topics. I wanted to ask is, what have you noticed out in the field as far as the relief that family members or their loved ones have whenever the elephant's named, whenever hospice is actually spoken out loud? What have you seen out in the field?
I'm going to say this is my experience because my dad was our hospice patient. You were his hospice nurse.
Yeah.
My dad was so energetic. He was changing a water heater, cutting the grass, and he thought hospice was too soon. He did not want to talk about it. He did not want to give up. He thought, if I get on hospice, he literally thought that we wanted him to die. I'm like, no, we want you to be comfortable. There are some disease processes that are unpredictable. When we discuss with him, look, this life-limiting illness, whatever it has, it means that it has no cure. It means that eventually you're going to die, because it's already touched. He had a cancer. It's already touched all areas of your body. It's metastasized. But we want you to have life moments where we can share with you and not like the mistakes we made with mom. Because sometimes a doctor will tell you, if you take this palliative chemo, you might live longer. They just hear you might live longer and they're like, the doctor knows more.
Right.
I'm going to live longer and I'm going to do this palliative chemo. But like my mom's experience, we ignored it. We didn't talk about death. We did the palliative chemo. The moment she came out of the hospital, she was sick. There was no more meaningful conversations, not very many meaningful moments, because she was now dying from the cancer, from the chemo treatments that made her real sick, and she became
On top
bedbound.
of the cancer.
Yes. So we lost time with her. On my dad's case, we didn't do all the extras. We just enjoyed time with him. And how would we know that we didn't, you see him changing, a water heater or mowing the lawn. You think you have a lot of time.
Right.
My dad died in 3 months.
Right. Yeah.
3 months, that. And it wasn't because of the medication. Sometimes people think you give them the medication, they're going to die. My dad was so against the medications. It made caring for him so easy when we were able to talk about death.
Talk about
freely.
hospice and death.
Yes. Because he did not want, when my mom was on hospice, he don't give her any medication. I don't want her to sleep all the time. This is just going to kill her. No, the medications aren't killing you. The disease process is killing you.
Correct. Yeah. No matter what.
Yes. Yeah. And so, when I told him, take this little tiny bit of morphine, it was the 5 milligrams. And I said, you're in so much pain. Look at your face. You're sweating bullets with the pain. He took it and I said, I'm going to come back tomorrow and I want you to tell me if it'll work and we'll do it again if you want to. I called him, I'll be there after work to give you medication, so see how it worked. Oh, I already took it. I'm like, what?
Yeah.
He said, I gave it to myself. He goes, I'm up already and I'm like doing this. He goes, oh, I think nothing's wrong. I feel so good.
Right.
After that, he was like sold.
Yeah. So I think, that's what's good is that, the relief, both of those stories are good to talk about because your mom had I would say, less of a quality of time, right?
Less.
Compared to your dad, where you named it, you named the hospice, you named, okay, this is what's going on with the cancer, your dad's dying, right? And, understanding, okay, we're not going to do all of these extensive measures because like your mom's case, she would come home and she was a lot more sick, right? The palliative chemo may have given her a little bit more quantity of time, but the quality was not there.
Exactly. Because my mother did live 1 year and 3 months, right? But my dad only lived 3 months. But we had laughter. We had Super Bowl party, And my mom was 1 year and 3 months.
Oh, yeah. Your
very
dad
sick.
was always Cowboys for sure.
Cowboys all the way.
That was
biggest Cowboys fan ever.
Every time I walked in there, his TV was super loud.
Oh, yeah. And he couldn't hear because he needed to have it loud.
Exactly, yeah. But that's what's the important thing about the relief, right, of naming it.
Yes.
How if you could advise or suggest, how would you gently name the elephant in the room to a family that may be struggling with saying the word hospice or dying?
I think that we need to just bring clarity, as a nurse, I would gently break it through advance directives, like I did with that family. Like, let's talk about what you want done. I know that we don't want to discuss that. It's a taboo. It's like, we're talking about death like it's going to happen tomorrow, but it's going to happen. If you can talk about your taxes, if you can talk about the presidency, if you can talk about the wars and everything that's happening, you can talk about death. Anything can happen to us at any moment. You can leave your house, crash. Anything can happen to you, and your family's not going to know.
Right.
The greatest gift you can give each other is the power of knowledge.
Power of knowledge. Yep. I agree. I definitely agree with that. I think that's good, kind of introducing it through advanced directives. So introducing it through like a side sister of something that involves hospice, right? That's a really good avenue, and just, we would advise, right, for, mom or dad, have that conversation,
Because what do we hear? We hear like the patient will say, I'm dying. And the child will say, no, you're not. I mean, it's like they know they're dying.
They know they're dying, yeah.
But you don't want to, it's because we're in denial doesn't mean it's not going to happen.
Yes, that's very true. Yep, that's very true. Just because we're in denial, so we would suggest to go ahead and have those conversations now.
Many people are qualified and they come to hospice so late when they can have so much time with comfort. We have patients on our hospice that have been with us over a year. People think, I'm going to get on hospice, I'm going to die right now. The government's going to kill them and get rid of them because it's like a conspiracy theory.
Yeah.
I
laugh, but it's
true, right?
Yeah.
Or you go to the doctor and, I had a family member tell me, I got filled with all this hope. We're going to do this and we're going to do this. And it's like they're selling you something great. Okay, let's go do the chemo. Let's go. It's like we're going to a party. We're going to go get some chemo, cream or something. And then they're like, sorry, it didn't work. Stop at the table out on the exit of the door. And that table is hospice. And now we've just been packaged to look like we're the Grim Reaper.
Right. Like this side of the medical field. Well, we did all we could, but now you need hospice. And
it's like, I didn't fail, but I ain't going to give you the explanation. I'm just going to turn around.
Exactly.
Like,
yeah.
Come on. We got to.
And so we get painted as, like you said, the Grim Reaper. And, that's not the case. I mean, the truth is that hospice is for the journey when someone has a disease, an illness that there's no cure for.
Life-limiting illness, yeah.
Life-limiting illness. And, that's part of why we're here is we're that, like I said, we're that village.
And a lot of times, like I tell people, you have Medicare benefits. This is your rights. You've worked all your life. You have saved, this is part of your life savings. If I told you I'm going to give you Medicaid and we're going to, you know, give you your medications and you're going to be like, yes. But I'm going to give you hospice. You're like, oh, no, you're not going to kill me. Like, no, this is part of your rights. You're entitled to care. You're entitled to comfort. You're entitled to an RN coming to your house and assessing you when I feel sick and I don't want to go to the doctor.
Right. And I tell that to families too. They ask, is there any cost to it? Right. And there's not. And I tell families all the time, think of it this way: is you have worked all your life and you've given into Medicare, Medicaid.
This is an investment.
This is an investment.
Their investment.
And now you're reaping the benefits from it at the end of life. So take advantage of it. And, to the point we were talking about earlier is, we bring someone on hospice, there is a potential and a possibility that they can graduate off services, right?
Exactly.
And we don't shy away from, if someone's not appropriate anymore,
Discontinue.
they would discontinue services, so that's why we're here. One of the other things I wanted to ask is, what would you say to someone out in the community or, family member, about having a conversation about hospice or death or their wishes at the end of life? How would you bring that out?
I would, as a hospice nurse, I would just plainly ask them, have you discussed? Because every time we do an admission, we have to talk about funeral arrangements. We have to talk about, do you want to be a DNR? We have to have those harsh conversations, and we do it gently through the advanced directives field, right? Because, it is breaking the boundary. Mm-hmm. It's breaking the ice when no one else wants to talk about it.
Right.
And that's the only way we can really do it. If there's another avenue about talking about, death, it has to be through an advanced directive to make it easier for us, because we're the middleman. We're the ones that are trying to be the referee in the center when, what I've seen a lot of is you have a family member, bring their family member onto hospice, and then you have a lot of voices. Mm-hmm. Everybody else wants to say, but why do you need that? And what do you need this? And what is it? No, come talk to this doctor. So now you have a lot of confusion. Mm-hmm. And I like to call those voices the voice of chaos, right? Mm-hmm. But there's always going to be a voice of truth. Mm-hmm. It's going to tell you a different story. I love that song because, you have to tone it down. Right. And listen to that still small voice that's coming from inside of you,
voice of
guiding you.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Yeah. Yes, absolutely. I had a patient one time, brought his wife on. And when he was diagnosed and said, you need to go on hospice, do you know he called me, wanted me to be his nurse. He was so excited. That's my first and only patient that celebrated coming on services. Hospice. Yeah. He was like, I got the best nurse. I'm just going to be living high. And I was like, okay. That was so funny. But I got to discharge him. And that was even more beautiful, right? Because you think you're going to come on hospice. You're not going to have no treatment. That patient had a very large wound on his leg. Mm-hmm. It took up the whole length of the leg. And I didn't know he had that wound for 25 years. Yeah, for a long time.
Yeah, that's a long time.
And being a diabetic, he wanted to wear a nice set of boots. That boot caused him an abrasion. That abrasion turned into a large ulcer. Mm-hmm. Just using our own wisdom and knowledge as nurses, I was treating it, working with the doctors, getting new orders. That wound started to heal. But his children wanted to meet me and say, I want to meet this nurse who is treating this wound that I've never seen gone since I was a baby.
Right.
And I'm like, really? He says, yeah, I've always seen that wound there. That when he went to go show the doctor who was treating it, a military doctor, and they were like so excited. I started to receive all kinds of things in the mail for him. And after that, I said, you know what? You're on a new journey. You're healing.
Exactly. You're healing.
And I said, you may still have a life-limiting illness in this area, but, now you have a chance.
Right.
So we discharged him, and that was a plus.
Yeah, exactly. That's the great celebration too. Is
not just because I'm a hospice nurse, I'm gonna do nothing. Like no,
yeah, exactly.
It didn't work. That doctor didn't fix it.
We are not the Grim Reaper.
Yeah,
no, definitely not. We if anything, we're the safe passage.
Yeah,
right?
And I think that because I come to the house more often than he went to the doctor, it really made a difference. And that's the difference that when you have, hospice.
And that's I'm glad you said that too, because one of the misconceptions is, not knowing what type of care they're going to get
Right.
because they're not going to go see their doctor anymore. But if anything, they are getting more care,
Right.
right? Because, nurses were going out there at least once a week or
Yeah.
even more. There's standards of practice that we have to follow. And, so we are seeing these families in their homes once a week at least, right?
Yeah.
They get a full team though assigned. They get a social worker, a chaplain, even a
Yes.
health aide to help bathe them and do other, things of that nature for them if they want. And, so it's, like I said, they get more care.
They do.
And the fact that
They
we
just
have,
don't realize
they don't
what good hospice is. It's just-
exactly. And if anything, we have quick access to the doctor,
yes.
right? Compared to trying to call the clinic and set up an appointment and, scheduling out 2 months for a, visit with the doctor. We're right there messaging, calling the doctor. Hey, this is what's going on with so-and-so, and they get a higher acuity of care.
They do. And now that we have the elephant out of the room, this is the first step, right?
Right.
We want to enlighten the room, the sentiment in the room. We want to make it real for them that it's okay to speak about it. It doesn't mean that abracadabra, you're going to die.
Right.
You say the word, you're going to die. Like, no,
Right.
it's not. It's going to happen to all of us, but in God's time.
For sure. Another thing I would say is, a good way that the community can, talk about it is just ask mom.
Have a conversation.
Have a conversation.
Let's
Mom,
meet.
what would you like to happen at the end of life?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Simple as that, and it's going to be tough for sure. It's going to be a tough conversation. Or dad, whenever you're a lot older and you can't care for yourself, what do you want done for you? Those type of questions opens up that door, to break that ice.
And it takes away a lot of that heaviness and the load
It does.
of keeping things under a rug secret.
It does. So,
It's like the unwelcome guest.
yeah,
An unwelcome guest, of course it is. But
yeah. Well, Cindy, I appreciate you doing this. This is a great first episode, I think.
I think so.
Yeah,
It was nice. It's nice to be part of your podcast. It's a very good idea, Ashton. I love
thank
it.
you. Do you have any last final words you want to say?
No, I just think that
We're on a good journey, huh?
we're on a good journey.
Yeah. So, alrighty. Well, thank you everybody for joining us. We'll see you next time. Thanks for joining us on I'm Dying Over Here. We hope today's conversation brought you a little laughter, a little light, and a deeper understanding of what it means to live abundantly, even at the end of life.
And until next time, keep loving big, living fully, and finding beauty in the moments that matter most. Proudly sponsored by Abundant Hospice, where every moment matters.